What happens when a chance encounter in a mall sparks an unexpected confrontation? Watch till the end to see how one woman's judgment turns into a life-changing lesson for both her and the person she wrongly accused. Title: A Moment to See. Naomi Richards had long ago learned to embrace the stillness. She wasn't one for crowds, but the Willowfield Mall on a Saturday afternoon was a place she could blend into without drawing attention. The hum of voices, the soft shuffle of shoes on polished floors, and the occasional burst of laughter from teenagers sipping oversized sodas. These sounds surrounded her like a soft blanket. For a freelance writer like Naomi, it was the perfect retreat. Today, she wasn't here to shop or to entertain herself with the latest trends. No, Naomi had come for a short break, a few quiet moments to herself after a week filled with deadlines and family obligations. She moved through the aisles, her steps slow and deliberate, scanning the vibrant windows of stores without truly seeing them. Comfort was her priority today, and her outfit, a well-worn cardigan, jeans, and sneakers, reflected that. But like many things in life, comfort was a concept that didn't always match the world's expectations. As Naomi neared the central atrium of the mall, a large bench caught her eye. She made her way over, finding an empty spot to sit. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows and bathing the space in warm light. Naomi leaned back, closing her eyes for a brief moment of peace. The tranquility didn't last long. A voice sliced through the air like a knife, sharp and clipped, pulling Naomi from her moment of calm. She blinked and turned toward the sound. "Excuse me, do you even belong here?" Naomi's gaze fell upon a woman standing just a few feet away. She was dressed impeccably, her tailored blazer fitting her slender frame perfectly. Oversized sunglasses obscured her eyes, but there was no mistaking the disdain in her voice. The woman's designer purse was held tightly, almost defensively, in one hand. Naomi's brow furrowed. "I'm sorry. You heard me." The woman's tone was cold, her words laced with an impatience that bordered on condescension. "You're loitering. People like you make it hard for businesses to keep their spaces clean and welcoming." Naomi blinked in confusion. Loitering? She was just sitting, taking a break, minding her own business. "I'm not loitering," Naomi said, her voice steady but confused. "I'm just sitting here." The woman scoffed, her eyes scanning Naomi's outfit with barely concealed judgment. "I suppose you're waiting for someone to give you a handout? Or maybe you're casing the place." Naomi's stomach twisted with the sudden, sharp sting of being unfairly judged. It wasn't just the words that hit her, it was the tone. The way they seemed to assume so much about her with nothing more than a glance. And there was the crowd now, too. Naomi hadn't noticed the growing number of onlookers, their curious eyes shifting toward her as the confrontation unfolded. The weight of their gaze only added to the tension in the air. But Naomi didn't flinch. She straightened her back and looked the woman in the eye. "Ma'am," she said calmly, "I think you've made a mistake." The woman laughed, sharp, humorless. "Oh, I doubt it. You can't expect to walk into a place like this and not stand out." The woman's words stung more than Naomi cared to admit, but she wouldn't let them show. Instead, she tilted her chin slightly, meeting the woman's gaze directly. "I'm sitting here because I can," Naomi replied, her voice steady, "because this is a public space. I'm not doing anything wrong." The woman's smirk faltered for a moment, but she recovered quickly, her lips curling into something more venomous. "Of course you'd say that," she snapped. "People like you always have an excuse." Naomi's pulse quickened at the implications in those words. People like you. She had heard that tone before, from classmates in her youth, from neighbors who didn't understand her. It was the sound of someone deciding who you were without ever bothering to ask. Naomi wasn't going to let it stand. "People like me?" Naomi repeated, her voice gaining strength. "And what exactly does that mean?" The woman's eyes flickered, a moment of hesitation before she pressed on. "Look at you, you're not shopping. You're just sitting here, taking up space, making people uncomfortable. Do you even have a job?" Naomi's breath caught at the final jab, the question hanging in the air like an accusation. As the words hung there, she could feel the sting of judgment pressing down on her chest, making her heart race. The crowd had grown and she could see some faces exchanging uneasy glances, but no one stepped in. It was as though they were waiting for something, an answer, a resolution, anything but the uncomfortable silence that had settled between them. Naomi took a deep breath, letting the air fill her lungs as she slowly stood, her movements deliberate. The woman took a step back, seemingly surprised by Naomi's quiet strength. "I do have a job," Naomi said, her voice unwavering. "In fact, I work hard to support myself and my family, and for the record, I'm sitting here because I can and because I want to. It's not your place to judge." The woman's eyes flashed with something Naomi couldn't quite place: surprise, irritation, or perhaps a hint of fear. But she quickly masked it with a scoff. "People like you always have an excuse," she muttered, turning her nose up as though Naomi's words didn't matter. Naomi's gaze hardened. "I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to show you that assumptions like yours only make things worse. Do you even see me? Or have you already decided who I am before I've spoken a word?" The woman's face flushed, the corners of her lips curling into a tight frown. Naomi could see the moment she realized the power had shifted, just slightly, from her hands to Naomi's. The crowd had gone still, the hum of mall chatter slowly quieting as people sensed something bigger unfolding. "I don't need to know you to see what's obvious," the woman sneered, though her confidence seemed to be wavering. "Look at you. You're not even trying to fit in. People like you don't belong here." Naomi's chest tightened, but she remained calm, taking another step forward. "People like me?" she echoed, her voice growing firmer now. "What does that mean? What does people like me even look like to you?" The woman's lip curled as though Naomi's words were a personal attack. "I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking," she replied, her voice lowering with a new, insidious edge. "You stand out in all the wrong ways. Look at yourself. Look at what you're wearing. Do you even belong in this space?" Naomi's stomach churned, but she refused to let it show. She had lived her life feeling like an outsider, whether it was because of her background, her choices, or her appearance. But she had learned over the years that people like this woman fed off of that sense of discomfort, of making others feel small. "Well, maybe that's the problem," Naomi said, her voice carrying an edge of defiance. "Maybe you see me as something I'm not because you're only looking at what you want to see, what you've been taught to see." The woman stepped back as if Naomi's words stung. The crowd, now larger than ever, seemed to sense the shift as well. Naomi glanced around, noticing the mix of expressions, some disbelieving, some embarrassed, others outright angry. She felt their eyes on her, but it didn't matter. She wasn't going to let this moment go to waste. "What do you mean by that?" the woman demanded, her tone sharp but no longer as sure of itself. "What are you implying?" Naomi took a step closer, and the tension in the air thickened. "I'm implying that what you see in me is not who I am. It's just a projection. You don't know anything about me, but you've decided, based on nothing but assumptions, that I don't deserve to be here. Why is that? Why does my appearance make me a target?" The woman faltered, her eyes flickering to the crowd. Naomi could see the woman's carefully constructed mask starting to crack. She was no longer the woman who held all the power in the conversation, but instead someone struggling to hold on to her pride. I I don't know what you mean," the woman mumbled, her voice sounding less sure, almost defensive. "You're just making this about me when you're the one causing the problem." Naomi pressed on, refusing to let the moment slip by. "No," she said firmly. "This isn't about me or you or even the people standing around watching us. This is about the way you see people and how you're so quick to judge. You see someone who's different, and immediately they're a problem. But the truth is, it's not me you're upset with. It's something inside you that's making you feel threatened. And rather than confronting that fear, you're trying to deflect it onto me." There was a long silence. The crowd, which had been shifting and murmuring, was now utterly still. Naomi could feel the weight of the moment. Everyone was waiting for something to break, but what? Would the woman crack under the pressure? Would she lash out again? Finally, the woman spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't understand." Naomi tilted her head slightly, her gaze softening. "Try me," she said quietly, taking a slow, deliberate step closer. "What don't I understand?" For a long moment, the woman stood there, her posture stiff. Naomi could see the internal struggle on her face. Her perfectly coiffed hair and pristine outfit suddenly seemed out of place in the silence of the moment. The confident, judgmental woman seemed to shrink in on herself, her eyes darting to the crowd, searching for some ally who never came. I. I grew up with nothing, the woman finally admitted, her voice breaking slightly. My parents lost everything in the recession. We were poor, invisible. I know what it feels like to be judged, to be dismissed before I even spoke a word. But I also know what it's like to fight, to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, to look like you've made it, even when you haven't. Naomi was taken aback, not expecting such a raw admission. She had prepared herself for a defensive reply, but this was different. The woman's words hung in the air, heavy with vulnerability and regret. Naomi took a deep breath, the anger she had been holding on to starting to fade, replaced by something softer: empathy. So you've spent your life trying to prove something, Naomi said gently, her voice no longer cold or confrontational. But in doing so, you've forgotten how to truly see people for who they are. Instead of letting others be themselves, you've been caught in your own need to appear perfect. And now, when you see someone who doesn't fit that mold, you're afraid. The woman's face crumpled, the mask of superiority she had been wearing slipping completely. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken realizations. Naomi took another step closer, her voice soft but firm. I don't want to fight you. I want you to see me for who I am. Not for what I wear, not for where I sit, and not for your assumptions. People don't owe you an explanation for existing, and yet here we are in a moment where you have the chance to understand. Do you want to take that chance? The woman's lip trembled, and for the first time she looked around at the crowd. Their faces, once full of curiosity or judgment, were now softer. Some nodded, as though in understanding. Others simply waited, silent, patient. Finally, the woman looked back at Naomi. I don't know how to undo all of this, she said, her voice shaky. I've spent so many years living in fear of being seen as weak. But maybe I've been wrong. Naomi smiled, a small, quiet gesture of encouragement. It's not about undoing the past. It's about moving forward, about learning. I don't have all the answers either. But I'm learning too. The crowd seemed to exhale, a collective release of tension. Naomi stepped back, letting the woman process her words, giving her space to breathe. She could feel the shift. Something had changed in that exchange. It wasn't about proving who was right or wrong. It was about allowing a moment of understanding to blossom, where there had once been nothing but assumptions and prejudice. The woman's posture seemed to soften, and for the first time, she truly looked at Naomi. Not as a stereotype or an outsider, but as a person. Naomi's phone buzzed in her pocket, a reminder of the world outside this moment, but she didn't reach for it. She didn't need to. The transformation, however small, was unfolding in front of her, and she knew that this was a moment that would ripple far beyond the mall. As Naomi stood there, her heart pounding in her chest, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. The woman, no longer a faceless antagonist, was standing before her, quietly processing her words. Naomi could feel the shift in the air, the invisible change that had just taken place. It was small, but it was real. She had spoken her truth, and now it seemed that the woman was grappling with hers. For a moment, Naomi wasn't sure what would happen next. Would the woman lash out again? Would she make an excuse and walk away? Or had Naomi really managed to get through to her? The silence between them stretched, long and heavy, before the woman finally spoke. I don't know how to apologize for all of this, she murmured, her voice barely audible. I've spent so much time building up walls, convincing myself that I'm above everything, above everyone, that I never stopped to see what it was doing to people. I didn't realize. Naomi nodded gently, stepping back a little to give the woman space. She wasn't sure where this conversation was headed, but she knew that forcing an apology out of someone wouldn't change anything. The process of reckoning with one's actions, especially ones buried under years of self-doubt and fear, was never instantaneous. It took time. It took effort. It took the willingness to look at oneself without the comforting shield of pride. You don't have to apologize to me, Naomi said, her voice soft but firm. You just have to start seeing people for who they really are. Start listening, really listening. It's the only way you'll grow. The woman blinked, as though the simplicity of the words had a much deeper weight than she had expected. She looked at Naomi, eyes wide, as though something inside her was being unraveled, piece by piece. I, I've been living like this for so long, and I thought I was in control. But it feels like I've just been hiding, she confessed, the vulnerability in her voice apparent. Naomi felt a pang of compassion, mixed with a touch of pride. We all hide in some way. We all have our defenses, our walls. But sometimes breaking them down is the only way to heal. There was a long pause. Naomi didn't rush her, allowing the woman to process the magnitude of the moment. Naomi understood that sometimes a single conversation, a single breakthrough, could change everything. But it couldn't be forced. Eventually, the woman nodded, though it seemed like she wasn't entirely sure of what she was feeling. I never realized how much my own fears were clouding my judgment, she whispered. I thought if I built this perfect image, people would accept me. But all it did was make me feel more alone. Naomi took another step back, finally letting the space between them settle. It's not about perfection, she said softly. None of us are perfect, but we can be real. That's all anyone needs, to be real with each other. The woman let out a shaky breath, and Naomi saw the small, almost imperceptible shift in her expression, a loosening, as though she was finally starting to let go of some of the weight she had carried for so long. Naomi smiled, her heart still beating with the intensity of the moment. It's okay, she said. You're not alone in this. But the first step is to start being honest with yourself. Once you do that, everything else will follow. The woman nodded again, her eyes glistening with a mixture of confusion and relief. She was no longer the cold, dismissive figure who had first confronted Naomi, but someone who seemed, for the first time in years, to be facing the raw truth about herself. The crowd, which had been watching the exchange in rapt attention, seemed to sense the shift as well. There was no applause, no grand recognition of the moment, but the air was lighter now. Naomi could feel the collective tension dissipating. She turned, glancing at the people around her. Some still stared, some whispered among themselves, but no one seemed to be judging the woman anymore. The power had shifted, and now it felt like everyone could breathe a little easier. Just as Naomi was about to leave, feeling the moment had come to an end, the woman spoke again, this time with more resolve in her voice. I don't know where to go from here, she said, but I know I need to change. Naomi turned back to face her, a quiet smile forming on her lips. It's a journey, she said, one step at a time. And with that, Naomi turned to leave, feeling the weight of the moment lift from her shoulders. She had come to the mall not expecting anything beyond the usual mundane tasks, but she had walked away with something far greater than a simple shopping trip. She had made a difference. Not through grand gestures, not through confrontation, but by speaking her truth and standing firm in it. As Naomi walked away, she felt the eyes of the crowd on her, but this time it didn't matter. She had spoken her piece. She had been real. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had done something that mattered. The woman, still standing in the same spot, watched Naomi's retreating form. For the first time in years, she felt the stirrings of something deep inside her. A quiet, powerful urge to finally break free from the shackles she had created for herself. There was no instant transformation, no magic fix, but for the first time she felt like she could breathe. And maybe, just maybe, that was the start of something new. Naomi turned away, her steps calm but determined, as the woman's words echoed in her mind. She had said what she needed to, and now it was up to the woman to decide what to do with it. The crowd slowly dispersed, leaving the mall in its usual hum of activity, but Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened. Days passed and life resumed its regular pace. Naomi found herself caught up in the usual rhythm of deadlines, family, and small moments of joy. Yet, she couldn't forget the woman from the mall, the transformation that had started in a single, heated exchange. A week later, as Naomi wandered through the same mall for a quick errand, She found herself stopping at the children's bookstore. As she picked out a book for her niece, a voice behind her made her turn. It was the woman. She looked different now, less rigid, her posture softer, her expression humble. Naomi recognized her instantly. The woman smiled tentatively. "I've been looking for you," she said quietly. "I wanted to thank you." Naomi nodded, surprised but glad to see her. "You're welcome," she said, her voice warm. The woman seemed to hesitate for a moment before reaching into her bag and pulling out a small book. "This is for you," she said, holding it out. Naomi took the book, surprised at the gesture. It was a collection of essays on empathy and understanding. "I thought of you when I saw it," the woman added, her voice a little unsure but sincere. "Thank you," Naomi said, touched. "I'm glad to see you're okay." The woman's smile was softer now, a little more genuine. "I've started volunteering, trying to understand people better. It's not easy, but I'm trying. I want to be different." Naomi smiled back, her heart swelling with quiet pride. "That's all anyone can do. Take it one step at a time." They shared a moment of silent understanding, a bond born from vulnerability and change. The woman's journey was just beginning, but Naomi knew it was real. As Naomi left the store, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that sometimes change didn't happen all at once, but in the smallest of moments. And that was enough.